Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson Smith. Good to be with you this Friday evening. We are broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Hope you've all had a wonderful week. We appreciate you stopping by on this Friday night as SpaceX is preparing to launch a geostationary satellite on behalf of SiriusXM. SiriusXM, for those unfamiliar, is a popular satellite radio service. Satellite getting ready to head up to GEO is the SXM-10 satellite, manufactured by Maxar Space Systems. Maxar has been working with Sirius to launch its satellites and manufacture them going back about 2 decades now. This is the third generation Sirius satellite that is going to be heading into orbit. And it comes just 6 months after the last SiriusXM GEO satellite was launched by SpaceX from this pad. That was back in December with the SXM-9 satellite. As we're getting things going, I want to thank the more than 400 of you who are watching live. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking the like button and sharing the stream. Allows more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. Want to give a shout out to our moderators in the live chat who are helping us out today. So we've got Jeff Hansen, Aussie Space Girl, Astro Joe, Clistia Lee. Scrolling to see if any of the other mods are here to give them their flowers. Not seeing any at the moment, but if you do see any of the other mods pop on in, be sure to give them a hello. You can help out the mods by following the rules of the live chat. Number one, that we ask that you refrain from delving into overt politics and religion, that you converse in English so that our moderators can respond as necessary, that you refrain from using all caps as you converse with one another, and of course the golden rule that you treat each other with the same respect that you'd like to be treated with in the live chat. I see we have Pat Ewing joining us from St. Cloud, Florida. Someone from Arizona, but now I'm not seeing that anymore. Up into the live chat and let us know where you're watching from. Steve B. checking in from British Columbia in Canada. Got Americo Marcial from Orlando, Florida here. Near and far, we're glad that you're able to join us tonight. And hopefully for those of you who are in the Central Florida area, the clouds are starting to break up a little bit, so hopefully you'll have a decent view of this Falcon 9 rocket as it takes flight from Space Launch Complex 4 East. That's the pad that you see live in the center of your screen right now with the Falcon 9 rocket standing tall. These live launch broadcasts are made possible in no small part by our ongoing support from our channel member community here on YouTube. So thanks to folks like Larry Grove, Greg Smith, The Rocket Girl, I'm Lita, Bubba Ray, Bill in Lauderdale, and many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, that is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to our member-only videos here on YouTube, access to our members-only Discord server, and of course the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments from here at the Cape in 4K. Speaking of new channel members, I want to welcome in Randall LaPlante and Donna Smith, both joining us with membership at the pad leader level. Glad to have you as part of our little crew here. Last little bit of housekeeping. If you have a comment or question about this mission or other goings on in the realm of space and spaceflight, you can have your comment elevated by using the YouTube Super Chat feature. And not only will you be giving us some interesting things to talk about as we cruise on through the count, but you'll also be supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now with our live coverage, and that, my friends, is always greatly appreciated. The Brevard County Emergency Operations Center has activated, as they always do, in support of this and every launch opportunity. For those of you who are coming to our broadcast from X or our other social channels, you may have caught Adam Bernstein's brilliant photo of lightning streaking across the sky over the vehicle assembly building from our vantage point here at the press site. Weather has been calming down since that point, which is certainly good news and is projected to continue to be a lessening impact as the launch opportunity rolls on. But in response to that, SpaceX is pushing back the T0 time for this mission by 5 minutes. So we've updated our countdown clock to reflect that. Given the weather that is still lingering in the area and the fact that SpaceX has a 4-hour launch window, as long as they have not started fueling, wouldn't be terribly shocked to see another adjustment to the T0 as we roll on. But for now, SpaceX is targeting 11:24 p.m. Eastern, 03:24 UTC as our new current T0. As it stands now, time currently T minus 55 minutes, 54 seconds and counting. Want to thank a couple folks in the live chat for your support this evening. Our thanks to Bill in Lauderdale for a $5 super chat. Appreciate that, Bill, who says, just to get the night started for the mods. And Monkey Tree Rob with a $5 super chat as well, who says, second that. Hey, Will, thank you, mods, for keeping things tight. And yes, appreciate our mods for all they do in the live chat here. I mentioned our Adam Bernstein earlier, of course, just one piece of our team making these launch opportunities possible. He, along with Michael Caine, will be photographing this launch as it takes flight tonight, hopefully at 11:24, barring another slip in the T0. John Pisani has this launch off, but you should be following all the photographers we have here at Spaceflight Now. You can find them at their handles here on X. Adam is at ABurnNYC, Michael Caine at MD Caine Jr., John Pisani is at John Pisani Photo, and be sure to follow Spaceflight Now simply at Spaceflight Now. If you yourself are not on X, you can also find us on Threads, Facebook, and Blue Sky. We'll also be joined with tracking assistance this evening by our friends Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images, as well as Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions. As we mentioned at the top of the broadcast, tonight's Falcon 9 flight is going to be carrying not a batch of Starlink satellites, as so often is the case, but rather SiriusXM's SXM-10 satellite. The spacecraft arrived in Florida last month in order to continue the processing work ahead of the flight tonight. Taking a look at the transport vehicle that was managed by Maxar Space Systems, which is the manufacturer of this and many other satellites for SiriusXM in the past. Taking a look at the satellite itself, you can see it there as it was going through processing in Maxar's facilities. This satellite is built on their 1300 class bus series, which has been used and modified for quite a number of missions in the past, including the EchoStar XX6 or 26 satellite. Here's a look at the mission patch for tonight's flight of the SXM-10 satellite. You can see a cartoon version of it in its on-orbit configuration on the left of the Falcon 9 rocket. And then, of course, the SXM, or the SiriusXM dog logo on the right. Of course, as I'm talking, I've got my iPhone next to me, and every time I say SiriusXM, I set off my... Got to keep a close eye out for that. Apologies for folks in the audience if I'm inadvertently setting off your phone's assistant too. Just under 49 minutes to go ahead of this flight of the Falcon 9 rocket. Want to thank channel member Ian Lito for a $5 super chat, who says, buying myself a little joy for my birthday. Thanks, Will, team, and mods. Happy birthday, Lita. Glad to have you with us for little birthday fun, and hopefully you've got a nice candle for you coming up here in about 48.5 minutes. And want to welcome in new channel member Charles Briggs, joining us with membership at the pad leader level. Not sure if that's our Chuck Briggs, but a welcome aboard regardless. Been a busy day for SpaceX as they've been preparing for this Falcon 9 flight here in Florida. They've also been busy down in Starbase, Texas, where earlier today they conducted a 33 Raptor engine static fire test of the Super Heavy booster that you see here on your screen. This is B-16, which will be used in order to fly the 10th flight of the fully integrated Starship rocket. Close up of the orbital launch mount here as those Raptor engines come to life. Of course, SpaceX is still working through the issues experienced from Flight 9, and no date has been projected as to exactly when this mission may happen, though I believe Elon Musk did say 3 to 4 weeks is optimistically when they're hoping to get back to the pad with the full rocket stack and have a public safety determination likely clearing them for Flight 10. We're also on the lookout for the conclusion of the investigation into the Flight 8 mishap, which, as of now, has not yet been closed out by the Federal Aviation Administration. Likely, at least, that investigation would be closed out before progressing into Flight 10, but that'll be a determination made by the FAA. Super Tech Boy in the live chat with the $2 super chat. Appreciate that. Who asks any word on the iSpace lunar lander? Not since yesterday, but for those who hadn't had the chance to read our article about that, iSpace did say that they had lost communication with the lander, and it is presumed that the Resilience lander had a hard touchdown on the surface of the moon, and so any operations with the payload on board would not be possible. It's an unfortunate setback for that Japan-based company, of course, since it comes just 2 years after their first mission, which also had a similarly unfortunate end to the mission. Teams are still going through the data from that, but it's believed to be linked back to the laser rangefinder, the altimeter on the vehicle, which during the press conference that happened in the hours following the landing attempt, they were essentially saying that the data coming in from the laser rangefinder was coming in later than would have been essentially operationally useful in order to make a safe landing, and so they were traveling faster than they should have been at various points of the end game of the landing operation, and so it just was not possible to make a safe touchdown with how fast they were going at the particular altitudes that they were for the speed. So currently, iSpace US is next up for the iSpace companies. iSpace US is of course, as the name suggests, the US division of iSpace. They're working on a considerably larger lander called Apex 1, which is being constructed and will be operated in partnership with Draper Laboratories here in the US and was selected by NASA as part of the Commercial Lunar Payload Services, or CLPS program. And they'll be targeting a touchdown on the far side of the moon with that operation. And as we thought may be the case, the T0 time for this mission has been adjusted, coming back to the SXM mission. SpaceX now targeting a liftoff of its Falcon 9 rocket at 11:39 p.m. Eastern, 03:39 UTC. They do have a 4-hour window tonight that extends out to 3:18 a.m. Eastern on Saturday, June 7th. So as long as they have not begun fueling the Falcon 9 rocket, they do have the option to extend their T0 time. As you can see in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, we've adjusted our countdown clock. Now, going back, we are currently at 56 minutes, 39 seconds and counting. with a little less than 51 minutes now on the clock once again. Let's take a moment to talk about the countdown timeline for this Falcon 9 rocket, the series of milestones that we're looking forward to as SpaceX is hopefully soon getting into a rhythm of fueling its Falcon 9 rocket there at Pad 40. As is the case with any Falcon 9 rocket, it'll start with the go-ahead for the start of the fueling process, which will begin at the 38-minute mark. Assuming that the green light is given for tanking, that'll start at the 35-minute point before flight with the loading of RP-1 on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages. And at the same time, liquid oxygen will start flowing on board the Falcon 9's first stage. 5 minutes after that, they'll start to load a cryogenic helium on board the pressure vessels of the Falcon 9's first stage. Same will be true on the second stage a few minutes thereafter. Helium is important, of course, because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. 23 minutes before takeoff, the second stage kerosene tank is full. Then at T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds, we'll see the strong back chill down process get underway. It's when SpaceX is conditioning the feed lines there at the pad ahead of second stage liquid oxygen load. We'll see this visually manifest as the so-called big vent. That'll start here at Pad 40 at about T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds, lasting up until about 30 seconds before second stage LOX load begins at the 16-minute mark. Moving right along, 7 minutes out, the engine chill will get underway. That's when SpaceX starts to flow a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, helping to protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. 6 minutes out, the first stage kerosene tank is full. Then at T-minus 4.5 minutes, the strong back retract sequence will get underway. That's when the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings will open up, and then the transporter erector, the strong back, will recline a few degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket, stays in that position until liftoff. At that point, it'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. 3 minutes ahead of takeoff, the first stage liquid oxygen tank is full. 2 minutes before T0, the second stage LOX tank also topping off, at which point the Falcon 9 rocket is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, we'll hear the call for the Falcon 9 being in startup. Control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch at T-minus 45 seconds. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds, and if all 9 Merlin engines are healthy and ignite as expected, the command will be given for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 rocket for a T0 liftoff. Once again, currently targeting 11:39 p.m. Eastern, 03:39 UTC, or just shy of 47.5 minutes from now, as the T0 currently stands. Coming up on 46 minutes ahead of liftoff. Coming into this launch opportunity, the 45th Weather Squadron did forecast about an 85% chance for favorable weather at the opening of the window. That improves to 95% favorable over the course of the launch window tonight. As meteorologists note, we are transitioning to a, quote, more typical and predictable wet season weather pattern, which will bring another round of thunderstorms and showers throughout these next several days. For those familiar with Florida weather patterns, they pop up in the afternoon, and usually there's a little bit of reprieve, and then there's another round in the evening time. Tonight's launch is being impacted potentially by the presence of cumulus clouds as well as the anvil clouds, which can extend the impact of a thunderstorm out beyond the main center of a cell. And as we figured might be the case, we have another time adjustment for you. Now looking at 12:24 p.m. Eastern a.m. It's already been a long day. Seems like it might be a long night. This window, as we mentioned, does extend out to 3:18 a.m. Eastern, so quite a bit of wiggle room for SpaceX and SiriusXM and their mission tonight. Hopefully they won't need this full band of time, but weather certainly not helping in that endeavor. Taking a look at a loop of satellite weather data here now. You can see things are starting to get a little bit more active over the Atlantic. We're formally in hurricane season now, but not anything like a hurricane impacting us tonight. But you can see this satellite view of the clouds that are cruising right on top of the spaceport here and sitting pretty over Space Launch Complex 40, unfortunately. Rain system starting to move south of us now. Clearing out from the area of the pad, which is good, moving a little bit further along the Brevard County lines down towards the Treasure Coast and Indian River County to the south of us. As you can see with the countdown clock, now just under 1 hour, 27 minutes to go at this point. Time currently T-minus 1 hour, 22 minutes, 10 seconds ahead of the current T0 for the flight of the SXM-10 satellite on behalf of SiriusXM. In addition to this Falcon 9 launch, SpaceX also gearing up for its next crewed mission, which is set to lift off from Historic Launch Complex 39A here at the Kennedy Space Center. Taking a live look now at our countdown clock shot. You can see the 4 astronauts of the mission there on the clock surrounding their mission patch in the center of that digital display. Peggy Whitson, who is the commander of the mission, a former NASA astronaut, is continuing to cement more records for herself. She'll become the first woman to fly aboard a SpaceX Dragon spacecraft for a second time when she takes off with her 3 crewmates. From left to right and the countdown clock, Peggy Whitson will be joined by the mission pilot, who's Shubhanshu Shukla, and a pilot within the Indian Air Force and one of 4 astronauts selected by the Indian Space Research Organization for its Gaganyaan mission, which is the inaugural spaceflight operation for the country of India. He was revealed by India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi back in February 2024 as being part of that 4 astronaut cadre. Moving on down the line, you've got the mission specialist representing Poland, who is Sławomir Uznański Wiśniewski. Apologies to any Polish viewers out in the audience. My pronunciation will hopefully get better by the time we get to our live launch coverage for the AX4 mission, but he is one of the mission specialists, again, coming from Poland. He is also a member of the European Space Agency's Astronaut Reserve class of 2022, being selected out of more than 22,500 candidates who applied for that position. Finally, on the far right of the countdown clock, you have Tibor Kapu, who is representing Hungary and is also a mission specialist on board this particular Falcon 9 flight. This 4-member crew will be flying on board the 5th and final Dragon capsule coming out of SpaceX as it's currently planned. Of course, SpaceX has bold ambitions for its Starship program to be its next literal and figurative big crewed vehicle. And for now, it believes that with its 5 Crew Dragon spacecraft and its 3 Cargo Dragon spacecraft, that it has enough of a fleet to be able to not only fulfill its obligations in service of the International Space Station, but also be in place to offer commercial astronaut services for missions like the Inspiration 4 flight and Polaris Dawn, as well as private astronaut missions like AX4. SpaceX also has an agreement to not only launch the upcoming Haven 1 space station on behalf of VAST, but also to operate crew missions to that precursor space station as VAST is continuing to develop its Haven 2 station, which it hopes to be a successor to the International Space Station down the road. It is one of a handful of companies that is developing a commercial space station for the aftermath of the ISS, Axiom Space being another one of those companies. Axiom hoping to launch their first module, which will attach to the space station. Its power and propulsion module, which will launch currently in 2028. As far as the Falcon 9 rocket is concerned for the AX-4 mission, we are expecting a rollout to the pad there that you see in the center of your screen now. That's coming up tomorrow, and that'll be followed the day after by a static fire test of that vehicle. A good final demonstration of the Falcon 9 in order to make sure there aren't any technical hiccups either with the rocket or with the ground systems there at the pad to ensure the health and safety of the astronauts as they get ready for the start of their roughly 2-week journey to space. We'll, of course, have much more live coverage as we continue on in the days to come for the AX-4 mission. So if you haven't already, now's a great time to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. And that way you've got your notifications turned on and you won't miss our live launch coverage when it begins. And if you'd like to learn more about the VAST space station that I mentioned, we do have a video for you here on the YouTube channel where we talk to the CEO of VAST, Max Haut, at the 40th Space Symposium inside the Haven 1 experience. So got some nice visuals in that one-to-one mock-up of what the Haven 1 station will actually look like. We also spoke with Drew Feustel, who's the lead astronaut for VAST, about the astronaut experience and the considerations made for future crews. Going back to the comment about the iSpace lander, we do have a video, I should say, that is also up on the YouTube channel that was talking about the hopes and prospects for the iSpace Resilience lander as it was making its final leg of the way to the moon. But there's also a good bit in there, not only about that particular lander and its payload, but also talking about the future for iSpace with the Apex 1 lander and the ambitions of that company as they hope to be one piece of a much larger cislunar economy. So even though that mission did end not the way that iSpace was hoping, there's still a lot of good information in there about what's to come for iSpace. So highly encourage you to check out that video if you haven't already. Coming back here to the pad over at Slick 40, currently 1 hour, 14 minutes, 14 seconds away from our current T0 of 12:24 a.m. Taking a look at our live chat right now. I want to thank the 2,000 plus of you who are with us live this evening as we're awaiting the launch of the Falcon 9 rocket there at Slick 40. If you haven't already, certainly appreciate it if you could do us a favor just by clicking the like button, sharing the stream, which will allows more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. Want to thank Mandy J. Houston for a $5 super chat who says, "Hi, Will." Hello, Mandy. Good to see you this evening. Hope you're doing well. Also want to thank James Castile for a $12 super chat. James says, $12 American to hear that Polish name again. Go Spaceflight now. Go SpaceX. Well, you will certainly hear me say it quite a number of times as we get into our launch coverage on Tuesday morning, June 10th. I think I want to polish up on saying it correctly a few more times before we get into that rhythm. Appreciate the support, James. I'll make sure it's a little smoother once we actually get into that coverage. We were just talking about the SpaceX Dragon, of course, that's going to be launching the AX-4 mission coming up on Tuesday morning, if all continues to go well. Launch readiness review is coming up in the next couple of days. We did actually, as we are currently on the anniversary of the docking of Boeing's CST-100 Starliner spacecraft as part of the crew flight test mission. That was 1 year ago today when it arrived at the International Space Station with NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams on board. Of course, if you want to learn all about the history of the Starliner, we've got a couple of great videos for you on that right now on the channel. Won't go into the full legacy of the vehicle and the crew there, but do have somewhat of an update for you on the status of the next time that Starliner will fly. If you haven't already seen our post about this on X, you can read the full statement there, but I'll just summarize the most pertinent points, which is that NASA and Boeing are currently targeting a launch no earlier than early 2026 now for the next flight of Starliner, which was most recently, as of the last update a couple of months ago, was looking like a mission at the end of the year was still within the realm of possibility. That is now off the table. And they say the current launch bubble, I'll say, is, quote, pending systems certification and resolution of Starliner's technical issues. Again, we've got a number of videos up on the channel going into the details about those technical issues, but put quite simply, the Reader's Digest version is there are still outstanding questions about the thrusters on the service module of the Starliner spacecraft, partly to do with how much heat can build up within the dog houses, which are the 4 pieces on each quadrant of the service module, which encase a series of thrusters, the reaction control system thrusters, or RCS thrusters. Also, NASA and Boeing, I should say, are still determining whether the next flight of Starliner will have crew or not on board. A NASA spokesperson says that there are NASA astronauts that are training for a post-certification mission. However, they have not, quote, yet assigned a full Starliner 1 crew for focused training, end quote. Now, for those of you who may have been following the Starliner program over the years, you'll know that there were astronauts assigned for the Starliner 1 mission. And in fact, as we had our coverage of the rollout of the Starliner capsule from the Commercial Crew and Cargo Processing Facility, or the C3PF building here at the Kennedy Space Center, out to the pad at Slick 41, there were 4 astronauts, 2 NASA astronauts, 1 Canadian Space Agency astronaut, and a JAXA astronaut who were there in addition to Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams. 3 out of those 4 at that point were confirmed to be official members of the Starliner 1 mission at the time. alongside the JAXA astronaut who was never formally announced, but there were a number of indicators suggesting that he was one of the mission specialists for that mission. However, fast forward to today, asking NASA, as we have, about the complement of astronauts who were a part of the mission for Starliner 1 and asking if they are still on board as crew members. They will not confirm that at this point in time. Not entirely clear as to the status of those astronauts. If you want to learn a little bit more about the comings and goings of the crew complement that have made up the Starliner 1 mission, we've got a story that is hot off the presses that has just been published to our website now. You can head on over to spaceflightnow.com and read that as we're awaiting the launch of this Falcon 9 rocket. Those two that I was alluding to, uh, Canadian Space Agency astronaut Josh Kutrick, NASA astronaut Scott Tingle, and JAXA astronaut Kimia Yui. Well, we know the status of two of them at least, Yui and well, and Mike Fink, who was also set to fly aboard Starliner 1, the backup crew member for the CFT mission. Both Fink and Yui were named as official members of the Crew 11 mission, which will fly aboard a SpaceX Dragon spacecraft set to lift off later this summer. As far as Scott and Josh are concerned, again, we actually asked both NASA and the Canadian Space Agency as to their status on the Starliner 1 mission, and neither agency will confirm if, in fact, they are still assigned to that mission or not. But today, if you go over to the Canadian Space Agency website, you can still find a page for the Starliner 1 mission, which does list the current crew as it's laid out there of Scott Tingle, Mike Fink, and Josh Kutrick, which, of course, as we were just talking about, is now out of date, at least with the reference to Mike Fink being a part of the Starliner 1 crew. We'll, of course, continue to follow the saga of the Starliner program and let you know about any other updates as they develop. We are now T-minus 1 hour and counting to the current planned T0 for this Falcon 9 rocket that you see here standing tall at Space Launch Complex 40. SpaceX currently counting down to a liftoff at 12:24 a.m. Eastern, 04:24 UTC for our friends around the world. If you're just now joining us, I'm Will Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now, and you're watching Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the hopefully coming up soon launch of the SiriusXM SXM satellite, SXM-10 satellite. Tough to say that 3 times fast. With the delay of the T0 time to just the other side of midnight, SpaceX unfortunately is just going to miss this launch happening on the anniversary of the launch of the SXM-8 mission, which lifted off on Sunday, June 6th. That was back in 2021, also from Space Launch Complex 40. Our photographer, Michael Kane, was out there to shoot that mission. Actually, you can head over to our website right now, spaceflightnow.com, and check out one of the pre-launch photos that he snapped of that flight. That's the lead image on the preview story for this mission, the SXM-10 mission. Taking a look at the live chat, want to thank Port Canaveral watchers for a $2 super chat. Appreciate that. It says, is the time true on the screen? At that point, 1 hour, 4 minutes. Yes, SpaceX did adjust the launch time to 12:24 a.m. Eastern. Just under 54 minutes to go ahead of the flight of this Falcon 9 rocket. As I mentioned, this will be the SXM-10 satellite on behalf of satellite radio company SiriusXM. The satellite is built on the Maxar 1300 class bus series, a quite large satellite that you can see here in this video, produced by Maxar Space Systems ahead of the SXM-9 mission, which launched back in December. You can see this here in the clean room here. The satellite stands more than 27 feet tall, and with its solar panels extended, it's about 100 feet in length. When fueled, it weighs about 6,400 kilograms, and it features a large unfurlable S-band reflector antenna, which is manufactured and supplied by L3Harris Technologies, which is headquartered here in Melbourne, Florida, not too far away from the Kennedy Space Center. Maxar is responsible for manufacturing satellites for SiriusXM for, as you've seen, more than 20 years now at this point. And they are also in the process of getting ready following SXM-10, the 11 and 12 satellites as well. After launching back in December, the SXM-9 satellite was announced to have completed its in-orbit testing and was declared fully operational by SiriusXM in a press release that was issued on January 29th. According to financial documents published as part of its first quarter earnings report, SiriusXM noted that $69 million was spent on satellite construction in the first quarter of 2025, and they anticipate spending about $220 million on satellite construction over the course of this calendar year, or this fiscal year. As the next two satellites for SiriusXM, the SXM 11 and 12 satellites, go through their manufacturing and getting ready to get to the launch pad. The company says it should be quite dramatically stepping down its capital expenditure on satellite construction, which, again, for 2025 is expected to be about $220 million, down from $262 million spent in 2024. Next year, they expect to have a $95 million capital expenditure for satellites in 2026, and then in 2027, about $45 million, and then near zero in 2028. .49.5 minutes on the clock as things currently stand with this T0. Taking a look at a fresh look at the weather here, you can see those clouds really pushing off and thinning out further to the south of the pad. Considerably less lightning in the forecast at this point in time as well, so that's becoming a less dramatic part of this outlook for tonight's launch opportunity. Of course, we're keeping a close eye on updates from SpaceX and any further adjustments to the T0 liftoff time. They do have a window that extends out until 3:18 a.m. And we do have an update that they have adjusted the T0 to now 12:39 a.m. Eastern. 12:39 a.m. Eastern is our new T0, 04:39 UTC. We've once again adjusted our countdown clock back again at 1 hour, 3 minutes, and 28 seconds. Once again, 1 hour and counting. Beginning to feel a little like Groundhog Day here at Kennedy Space Center. As once again, SpaceX is currently 1 hour away from launching its Falcon 9 rocket. Per the current T0 of 12:39 a.m. Eastern, 04:39 UTC. SpaceX hasn't put out any statement about the delays to the mission, but barring something extraordinary, this is most likely due to the weather that has been pushing through the Space Coast over the course of the last several hours. Things have dramatically calmed down, though, as we did have quite visually sensational lightning storms that were pushing their way around the spaceport, but those have largely thinned out, but they're presence and proximity to the pad is likely the reason that SpaceX and the fine folks over at the 45th Weather Squadron are making the call to continue to adjust the T0 launch time for today's Falcon 9 flight. SpaceX does have a launch window that extends out to 3:18 a.m. Eastern, 07:18 UTC this morning, or technically still Friday night here on the East Coast, so tomorrow morning, if you want to be super specific. Coming up to 57 minutes now ahead of the planned liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. Again, barring another adjustment to the T0. The Falcon 9 booster that is supporting today's mission is tail number B1085 in the SpaceX fleet. B1085, which will be making its 8th trip to space and back in support of the launch of this satellite heading to a geosynchronous transfer orbit. It began its flight history with the launch of a batch of Starlink satellites. That was the Starlink 10-5 mission, which lifted off on August 20th of 2024. As we've been talking about the Starliner saga, this little booster has been part of that whole mission, as after the launch of Starlink 10-5, it went on to fly the Crew 9 mission, which of course consisted of one NASA astronaut, one Roscosmos cosmonaut on the way uphill, and were joined by NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams on the way back down from the International Space Station after it was determined that they would not be flying back on Starliner. Crew 9 launched on September 28th, 2024. That was followed up by the launch of another batch of Starlink satellites, Starlink 6-77, on November 7th of last year. Followed up by a mission that was once a mystery, then revealed to be, as a matter of fact, a GPS satellite, Space Vehicle number 7, nicknamed Sally Ride, which lifted off under the moniker of RRT-1, leading up to liftoff, revealed after the fact to be the Rapid Response Trailblazer, or again, the GPS-3 Space Vehicle 7 mission, taking flight on December 17th of last year. This booster really connects all the conversations that we've been having today, because next up was the combo launch of Firefly Aerospace's Blue Ghost lunar lander on their first mission to the moon, as well as the Hakuto R Mission 2 lander named Resilience, both of which are now on the moon. Unfortunately, though, only Blue Ghost made it for a safe touchdown. That was followed up by the launch of Fram 2, which was the first time that a crew mission launched on a 6th flight of a Falcon 9 first stage booster, lifting off on April 1st of this year for that free flyer polar orbiting mission. Most recently, this booster launched the Starlink 6-93 flight back on May 7th, with 28 Starlink V2 mini optimized satellites that were sent up into low Earth orbit. Now, just over a month later, back in action again, or just now 1 month later, with the SXM-10 satellite. Closely watching for any further updates from SpaceX, but as things stand right now, we're 53.5 minutes to the planned flight of this Falcon 9 rocket. Of course, we'll continue to keep eye on the weather and a weather eye out for any adjustments to the T0 tonight. Time now, as it currently stands, just about 48 minutes ahead of liftoff for this Falcon 9 rocket. Of course, as SpaceX continues to make adjustments to its T0, as they have been throughout the course of the night, they are doing so more than likely in order to avoid impacts from these thunderstorms that have been rolling through the area. And largely pushed off, but the clouds are still potentially impacting a liftoff tonight. Of course, even when there isn't lightning in the area, a rocket passing through thick enough clouds can generate its own lightning by essentially charging the clouds and creating a static electricity effect. NASA has had standards and best practices in effect that are enforced along with the U.S. Space Force and the Federal Aviation Administration in order to prevent a rocket from launching in conditions that would trigger the risk for triggering lightning. Going back in time to the genesis of these rules, the Apollo 12 mission and the Atlas Centaur 67 flight both triggered lightning after launching. As NASA notes in its documentation describing the standard for lightning launch commit criteria, the Apollo 12 mission was able to recover from that lightning generating event and it was able to complete its mission successfully, but the Atlas Centaur 67 flight was destroyed. Since that time, there have been no other vehicles that have launched from the United States that have triggered lightning, and that's because of the adherence to the standards. So, all orbital launch providers here in the U.S. do follow these rules and guidelines. Obviously, they have meteorologists that are employed within their respective companies, but work very closely with the 45th Weather Squadron based at Patrick Space Force Base here on the Space Coast in order to ensure safe flight for all of the orbital class launch vehicles. We have once again a new T0 that SpaceX has adjusted to. We're just within an hour now, once again, from the launch of the Falcon 9 rocket. Currently targeting a T0 now just this side of 1 a.m., 12:54 a.m. Eastern, 04:54 UTC for those joining around the world. Just now midnight here on the East Coast. For those of you who may just be joining us, SpaceX has made a number of adjustments to the T0 tonight, currently targeting 12:54 a.m. Eastern, 04:54 UTC for our friends around the world. Taking a look at our live chat, want to thank a few folks for your support and our live launch coverage. Want to welcome a new channel member, Yonda Addy, joining us with membership at the pad leader level, and then turning right around and gifting a membership to someone else. So first off, thanks for joining us, Yonda. Glad to have you aboard, and thank you for your generosity, and a welcome aboard to our newest gifted channel member. Be sure to thank Yonda in the live chat if you have, or Yana, excuse me, in the live chat if you haven't already. And we hope you decide to stick around with channel membership. Also want to thank Lisa Lynch for a $10 super chat, one of our wonderful channel members, who says, hang in there, everyone. Thanks again to our great moderators and Cumulus Granatus. Big thanks to Will Robinson Smith. Let's hope we get to light this candle tonight. And I'll extend the thanks out to the rest of the Spaceflight Now team who happen to not be on the mic but are working hard to make this live launch coverage possible. And right now, doing quite a bit behind the scenes to make sure things are up and still running, given the delays tonight. I also want to thank channel member Joni Mahoney for a $10 super chat. Saying that this is for a case of off for the Spaceflight Now crew who has to stand outside. And yeah, thankfully we do have a long sleeve hooded mosquito jacket for Adam out there in the field. So while you are hearing quite a bit of mosquito activity hovering around our microphones, it does have that protection as well as some anti bug spray that we of course employ, as well as some other mosquito repellents. So we do what we can to keep our folks as safe as possible from those pesky mosquitoes. And a thanks as well to Bill in Lauderdale for a $5 super chat, who says, one last bump for the mods. And yes, really appreciate our moderators for hanging in there for one of these nights where SpaceX really employs the full weight of its launch window opportunity here. And of course, as long as SpaceX has not begun fueling its Falcon 9 rocket, they do have the option to extend the T0 throughout the course of their launch window today, which does go out to 3:18 a.m. Eastern. Fingers and toes crossed that they don't need all of that margin, but it is there for them to use. Just certainly hoping that they don't need it. Time now currently T minus 46 minutes and counting. As you mentioned earlier in this broadcast, the SpaceX Falcon 9 first stage booster that is flying today's SXM-10 satellite mission will be flying for its 8th time, so not going to make any movement on our Falcon 9 frequent flyers list, but just to recap, since the last time we ran through this, there was a little bit of adjustment here. So here is where our top flying list currently stands. Had to bump it up to 6 instead of just our top 5, since B1067 and B1077 still currently tied with 21 flights apiece. B1063 now has flown for 26 times, B1071 with 25 flights to its name. SpaceX is working to certify its first stage boosters for up to 40 flights apiece, while B1067 still holds the record for most flights of a Falcon 9 first stage booster. SpaceX has noted that at least one half of a pair of payload fairings has flown for 30 times. On the weather front, you may have heard the loudspeaker announcement coming from the vehicle assembly building about 15 or so minutes ago. What they were saying may not have been super clear, but essentially they were saying that the wind advisory has been terminated for all areas across the spaceport. So that's certainly a good improvement, that the winds are calming down and the lightning warnings have expired a couple of hours ago now. So lightning not in the immediate vicinity of Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, which is certainly a good thing, but teams continue to keep an eye out on the weather and watch those trends, especially for the impacts of the anvil clouds, which, while a thunderstorm may be quite a ways away, a detached anvil can extend the impact of that storm, where it would be potentially impacting this Falcon 9 rocket as it makes its climb uphill after leaving the pad. If another adjustment to the T0 is coming, it would be in the next handful of minutes, as SpaceX, broadly speaking, will make the call on the start of prop load at T minus 38 minutes, with fueling set to begin at the T minus 35-minute mark. We continue to be in what some folks like to say is a hurry up and wait kind of pattern, as we are awaiting SpaceX's decision on whether or not the weather is in such a place that they are able to start fueling the Falcon 9 rocket there at Slick 40. Now T minus 30 minutes and counting. Generally speaking, at this point, of course, is when SpaceX makes the call on the start of prop load for its Falcon 9 rocket. Looking out to see if there's any further adjustments of the T0 liftoff time, but not seeing any at this particular moment. We actually may be in a pattern where SpaceX is in a good position to start fueling its Falcon 9 rocket coming up in just about 2 minutes from now. Of course, unlike other orbital launch vehicles, once SpaceX starts tanking its rocket, it no longer has the margin in its launch window. It cannot hold the countdown because it uses a, as our moderator Jeff Hansen is pointing out to folks in the chat, a load and go style of fueling with its super cold densified liquid oxygen. So it'll continue tanking up until 2 minutes before flight. But once that liquid oxygen starts flowing, that sets the T0 time in place. Now at T minus 35 minutes and counting. At this point, as we have not gotten word of any further adjustments to the T0 time, we expect that SpaceX has now begun to fuel their Falcon 9 rocket in anticipation of launching the SXM-10 satellite. And as a matter of fact, we do have word from SpaceX just within the last minute. They're T-minus 35 minutes until the launch of this mission. Liftoff targeted at 12:54 a.m. Eastern. So with that confirmation from the company themselves, we are a go-ahead for tanking, which is now just about a minute into play. Liquid oxygen flowing on board the Falcon 9's first stage, and RP-1, a rocket-grade kerosene, flowing on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages. If you look near the base of the Falcon 9 rocket with this zoomed in view, if you see just beneath the X in the word SpaceX, starting to see a bit of a frost line form and a little bit of vapor as well in that area of the vehicle, trailing off from the rocket, as that super cold densified liquid oxygen mentioned earlier is now loading up on the booster's uh, LOX tank. Taking a look at the live chat, I want to thank the now more than 2,600 of you who are with us live at this point. Really appreciate your patience and hanging in with us this evening as we navigated some weather delays for SpaceX. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking the like button and sharing the stream. Allow some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. Also want to thank channel member Macaw SJ for a $10 super chat. Really appreciate that, Macaw. Good to see you tonight. Also want to welcome in new channel member Mark Baggett joining us with channel membership at the PAL leader level. Welcome aboard, Mark. We're glad to have you with us. As a reminder, channel membership comes with a number of perks. Those include discounts at our online shop, which is shop.spaceflightnow.com, access to member-only videos here on YouTube, access to our members-only Discord server, and of course the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments from here in Florida in 4K. Coming up on the 30-minute mark ahead of this planned flight of the Falcon 9 rocket, momentarily SpaceX will start loading cryogenic helium onto the pressure vessels for the Falcon 9's first stage. That'll be followed up by a similar process on the second stage a few minutes afterward, and that'll be used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during this flight. Time now, T minus 26 minutes, 22 seconds and counting. SpaceX is about to load the cryogenic helium into the pressure vessels on the Falcon 9's second stage momentarily. As the company is stepping through its fueling milestones, let's go ahead and talk about the other side of liftoff and walk you through the launch timeline, the nominal sequence that we're expecting with a good flight of this Falcon 9 rocket up through the deployment of the SiriusXM SXM-10 satellite. Following good liftoff of the rocket, that'll be followed by the vehicle throttling down as it passes through max Q, which is the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. It'll throttle back up and then begin to thermally condition the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage just before the 2-minute mark. And that'll set up a few events in fairly rapid sequence. We'll see first stage main engine cutoff, otherwise referred to as MECO, at about T plus 2 minutes and 28 seconds after takeoff. That'll be followed by stage separation and then the ignition of that Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage. The payload fairings up the top of the Falcon 9 stack will be jettisoned nearly 3.5 minutes post takeoff. A few minutes afterwards, the first stage booster will reignite 3 of the Merlin engines at its base to start a roughly 26-second long entry burn. And that'll help slow the vehicle down as it makes its way back through the atmosphere and target a planned landing on the drone ship, A Shortfall of Gravitas. The landing burn will begin just before the 8-minute mark. The upper stage engine will conclude its burn ahead of the planned landing of B-1085 on the drone ship, again, A Shortfall of Gravitas. If this mission is successful as far as the landing is concerned, this will be the 112th booster touchdown on that particular vessel, and that'll mark the 458th booster landing successfully to date. Moving along with our mission milestones, the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage will come on back to life at T plus 25 minutes and 53 seconds. There will be a burn lasting a little more than a minute, and that'll set up the SXM-10 satellite to be deployed at T plus 33 minutes and 11 seconds. So a fairly short mission, all things considered, for this Falcon 9 rocket. And the satellite will be launched into a geosynchronous transfer orbit. As far as the timing of things with the SiriusXM satellite, once it has reached its orbital position, it'll likely take about 2 months or thereabouts in order to fully run the satellite through its paces and ensure it's operating as intended before it becomes looped in and brought into full service. If you recall, the last SiriusXM satellite which launched, that took off on another Falcon 9 rocket from Pad 40 back on December 5th of last year. And it was January 29th when SiriusXM announced that the satellite had completed all of its in-orbit testing and was declared fully operational. So once this satellite deploys, expect an update from SiriusXM, if all goes well, likely late this summer, on it joining in with its other fellow satellites in geostationary orbit. Time now, T minus 22 minutes, 10 seconds. Just a couple minutes away from the so-called big vent, as SpaceX will be thermally conditioning the feed lines there at the pad ahead of second stage liquid oxygen load, which will begin at the 16-minute mark. Taking a peek at the live chat, I want to thank the now more than 3,000 of you who are with us live. Appreciate you stopping by on what for some may still be a Friday night. For those of us here on the East Coast, now technically Saturday morning. I also want to thank Carrie Alexander for a $2 super chat, who says, enjoy your live coverage and commentary. Thank you for the kind words, Carrie. Appreciate you stopping by and supporting our coverage. And T minus 20 minutes, 20 seconds and counting. And the big vent just now kicking off and underway. Again, this venting will last until about T minus 16 minutes and 30 seconds. And T minus 16 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. You can see the big vent is tapered off, and SpaceX is preparing to load liquid oxygen on board the Falcon 9 second stage, coming up in about 15 seconds. Taking a look at our live chat here, I want to thank channel member Gunner S for gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that, Gunner. Thanks for growing our community here on YouTube. And to our 10 newest channel members, welcome aboard to all of you. We're glad to have you with us. If you haven't already, be sure to thank Gunner in the live chat, and we hope you decide to stick around with channel membership. Also want to thank Beth Carlton for a very generous $20 super chat. Really appreciate that support at that level, Beth, who says, "You're my go-to every time I walk down to the beach to watch a launch. Thank you for all you do." Well, thank you so much for the kind words there. That's really quite lovely. Coming up on 14 minutes now ahead of the flight of this Falcon 9 rocket. Today's mission marks the 486th flight of a Falcon 9 to date, the 69th Falcon 9 to fly so far in 2025. Given this is a flight-proven booster, this will be SpaceX's 425th launch of a previously flown Falcon booster. Again, for those wanting to keep tabs on the AX4 mission coming up on Tuesday, tomorrow over at Pad 39A here at the Kennedy Space Center, we're anticipating the rollout of the Falcon 9 rocket with the Crew Dragon spacecraft on top. The first flight of the fifth Dragon, currently tail number, well, currently and will be moving forward, tail number C213 or capsule 213. It has been named by the crew of the AX4 mission. However, during a pre-launch press conference, former NASA astronaut and current head of human space flight over at Axiom Space, Peggy Whitson, said that they are not going to reveal the name until the booster, or excuse me, until the capsule is on orbit. However, during the pre-launch crew press conference, they did reveal the zero-G indicator is a swan called Joy. Swan having multiple meanings in the various cultures and countries that the three astronauts that are flying alongside Peggy Whitson come from. And cryptically, Peggy said that once we hear the name of the capsule, it'll also have some connection to the swan in some form or fashion. Making my best educated guess based on that, having no inside knowledge onto the formal name of the capsule as we're all awaiting the official announcement. Maybe something to do with this being the capsule's swan song for the Dragon program, this being the fifth and final, getting ready to launch. We'll just have to wait and see. Again, AX4 getting ready to lift off on Tuesday at 8:22 a.m. Eastern, 12:22 UTC. Speaking of launching soon, this Falcon 9 rocket, so let's go ahead and take a moment to talk about the workhorse vehicle for SpaceX. Falcon 9 stands at 70 meters or 229 feet in height. It has diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. Majority of that is made up by the booster. Stands represents about 2/3 of the rocket. Again, this is B-1085, which will be making its 8th flight today. At the base of the booster are 9 Merlin engines, which burn a rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen, producing 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Around the engine compartment are black carbon fiber landing legs, which will be used to land the first stage on the drone ship, A Shortfall of Gravitas. Above the first stage is the inner stage. This is a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core, which is surrounded by carbon fiber. In that image on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see the deployable hypersonic grid fins. These titanium winglets provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it comes back to the atmosphere. Tail first like a big old dart heading towards the drone ship. At the top of the inner stage are three mechanical latches which attach the vehicle's second stage. That first stage main engine cutoff. High pressure helium is used to release those latches, and four pneumatic pushers ensure clean separation. Second stage engine nozzle is also safely housed inside the interstage adapter until stage separation. SpaceX commentators note at the beginning of their coverage that they're still continuing to watch the weather, but right now things seem to be moving in their favor. Continues to move up the Falcon 9 rocket, the second stage, powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine, or an MVAC engine. It's equipped with a large nozzle, which is optimized for burns in the vacuum of space, hence the name. It produces more than 220,500 pounds of thrust, and it'll be fired twice on today's flight to place the SXM-10 satellite into its intended orbit. The MVAC engine burns the same propellant mix as the booster, liquid oxygen, and RP-1. Following the deployment of the satellite for SiriusXM, there will be a deployment or a deorbit burn, driving the upper stage back to the atmosphere, where it's designed to burn up and help eliminate creating space debris on this mission. Finally, at the top of the Falcon 9 stack are the payload fairings, which are currently encapsulating the SXM-10 satellite. Fairing halves are 13.1 meters or 43 feet in height, 5.2 meters, 17.1 feet in diameter. Following deployment, they will return through the atmosphere and then splash down into the waters of the Atlantic Ocean under the support of steerable parachutes. SpaceX commentators note that one of the fairing halves is flying for its 21st time and the other flying for its fourth. Taking a look now at some video from Maxar Space Systems regarding the SXM-10 satellite. Going to feel similar to what we saw earlier in the broadcast for the SXM-9 satellite. A little bit different B-roll for a different satellite. As I mentioned earlier in the broadcast as well, the satellite is built on the Maxar 1300 platform, more than 27 feet in height. With the solar panels extended, it's about 100 feet in length. Weighs about 6,400 kilograms at liftoff. Saw just a brief glimpse of it in its on-orbit configuration. It does include an S-band reflector antenna, which is manufactured by L3 Harris. Also want to note the difference in the time on our countdown clock and what you're seeing from SpaceX. Our clock is in real time. What you're seeing from SpaceX is coming in on a slight delay. So as long as we have views of the Falcon 9 rocket with our tracking cameras, we'll be making callouts in real time and then switching to the SpaceX timeline once we no longer have ground views of the vehicle. SpaceX commentators say they're tracking no issues currently.
Next up, the transporter erector, or TE, will retract away from Falcon. That's the large truss structure you see there next to the rocket. First, we'll see the clamps open around the second stage, and then the TE will begin to pull away from the rocket.
Pressurization for a strong back retract will come at about T minus 4.5 minutes. For the call out from SpaceX Mission Control, we'll hear that at about 4:30.
Front back retract has started.
And with that good call, we'll shortly see the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings open up, and then the transporter erector will pull back a few degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. Coming up, the next milestone will be the conclusion of first stage liquid oxygen loading. That should wrap up at about the T minus 3 minute mark. And you can see the strong back now reclining away from the Falcon 9 rocket. Now just under 3 minutes, first stage LOX loading should be complete. Did hear confirmation for stage 1 LOX load. Waiting for a call on stage 2 coming up at the 2 minute mark. Again, SpaceX's feed coming in on a slight delay, so the verbal call out will come a little bit after the 2 minute mark that we're seeing here on our countdown clock. SpaceX reports that no issues are being tracked. Seeing the ground gas closeouts now as SpaceX clears the feed lines of remaining liquid oxygen. Falcon 9 rocket fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant.
Gas launch closeouts.
And we got a good
1 minute and counting.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
And with that good call out, we're just awaiting the SpaceX launch director to give their go for launch.
Launch director, go for launch.
And with that confirmation, your go for launch just a little more than 20 seconds away from the liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. 15 seconds. And here we go in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition. And liftoff. Liftoff with a Falcon 9 rocket on the SiriusXM SXM-10 mission. The Falcon 9 has cleared the towers. Now, a little more than a minute into the mission, SpaceX will be throttling down for max Q, the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. You see the rocket passing through max Q. Soon, SpaceX will be thermally conditioning the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage ahead of its first burn. Great tracking views by our team this morning.
Chill.
Now we have.
Good call for MVAC chill. As we approach the 2-minute mark, we're coming up on first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO, which will happen at about T plus 2 minutes and 28 seconds. That'll be followed by stage separation and the ignition of the second stage engine. The payload fairings will separate just about 2.5 minutes into flight. About 10 seconds to MECO. And we have MECO, stage separation, and second stage engine start.
Cut off.
Stage separation confirmed.
MVAC ignition.
And a good ignition of that Merlin vacuum engine. Good visuals as well. The deployment of the payload fairings is coming up here now in just a couple seconds. And you see those fairings jettison.
Fairing separation confirmed.
And a good view of the SiriusXM-10 satellite. Coming up on 4 minutes into flight. SpaceX commentators note that the fairing recovery vessel that is being used on today's mission is named Doug, named after former NASA astronaut Doug Hurley, one half of the duo that flew the Demo 2 mission back in 2020. SpaceX Mission Control notes that both the booster and the upper stage are following nominal trajectories, coming up on 5 minutes into flight in real time. Next milestone coming up is in just a little more than a minute. which is the first stage entry burn, which will use 3 out of the 9 Merlin engines to begin to dramatically slow the vehicle down. Continuing to track a good burn of the Merlin vacuum engine. About 13,500 kilometers right now on the second stage. We're approaching the start of the entry burn in less than 10 seconds. We'll see if we can spot that with our tracking cameras, though, given the amount of clouds that are in the area, that may be a little tricky. The entry burn. Looks like we may have that. It's a little hard to tell. That might actually be the, I believe actually that is the entry burn. Spotted by our tracker here at the press site. Entry burn has concluded in real time, seeing the last little bit of it here on the SpaceX camera view. Now, the landing burn is going to be too far out and too close to the horizon for us to see with our tracking cameras. So at this point, we'll rely on the SpaceX onboard cameras for views of that. Landing burn set to begin just before the 8-minute mark in this mission. First stage booster transonic, traveling below the speed of sound. Also heard the call that the second stage is in terminal guidance, meaning that is approaching the end of the burn that's currently underway.
Stage 1 landing burn.
Stage 2 FTS is saved.
Landing lead deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed. Nominal orbit.
And for an 8th time, a good landing of B-1085. The upper stage also performed a nominal orbit insertion. Good views of the SXM-10 satellite. The upper stage will continue along its coast phase at this point up until T plus 25 minutes and 53 seconds. There will be a burn lasting just a little more than a minute, and then the SXM-10 satellite will be deployed at about T plus 33 minutes and 11 seconds. Because this is a customer mission, SpaceX will continue on with its upper stage camera views up until and through deployment of the SXM-10 satellite. So given that, of course, we'll continue with our live coverage so that we can all see the deployment of that satellite for SiriusXM, manufactured by Maxar Space Systems. Now, just a little more than 11 minutes into this mission. Again, the next burn of the upper stage engine coming up at just before the 26-minute mark for a burn lasting a little more than a minute. Taking a look at our live chat, want to thank a few folks for their support this evening. Thanks to Mark, Piotrowski for the $10 super chat, who says, thanks for all the timely updates. Launching from the 528 Causeway near Port Canaveral. Of course, coming in before liftoff, but hopefully you got some good views given your vantage point there near the port. Psychonaut69 with a gift of a Spaceflight Now membership. Really appreciate that, Psychonaut. Good to see you this evening. And to our newest gifted channel member, welcome aboard. Glad to have you with us. Also want to thank Tornadoes Gaming 234 YTB for marking now 2 months with us as a channel member at the pad leader level. Appreciate you sticking with us. Says go SpaceX, go SiriusXM, go Falcon 9. For those who may not have been with us earlier in the broadcast, of course, this is just the beginning of a busy weekend for SpaceX as over at Launch Complex 39A, they are preparing to roll out the Falcon 9 rocket in preparation for a static fire test, which will support the upcoming launch of the Axiom 4 mission to the International Space Station, or Axiom Mission 4, rather, which will take former NASA astronaut Peggy Whitson and her crew up to the orbiting outpost. Peggy Whitson just recently inducted into the Astronaut Hall of Fame for her time of service as a NASA astronaut. She will also be the second person to, or the third person to fly for a second time on board a SpaceX Dragon spacecraft. She joins her fellow colleague and former NASA astronaut at Axiom Space, Michael Lopez Alegria, who was the commander of both AX-1 and AX-3 missions. Axiom Space is putting in their bid for the private astronaut missions 5 and 6 alongside VAST, which is hoping to win its first contract with NASA to go ahead with a private astronaut mission. Both companies are working to create space stations that would replace the International Space Station once it reaches its retirement age in the 2030 timeframe. Other companies vying for commercial space stations and working towards those goals are Blue Origin in partnership with Sierra Space, who are building the Orbital Reef space station. And there's also Starlab, which is a subsidiary of Voyager, working with companies like Northrop Grumman, which at the onset of the commercial LEO destination competition, Northrop Grumman was going to be making its own space station, but it eventually decided to bow out of its own bid and instead join the Starlab team. Just a little more than 17 minutes into this mission, based on the SpaceX timeline of things, which is, of course, what we're relying on at this point in the mission. As we were awaiting the upcoming burn of the Merlin vacuum engine, just past the 25-minute point, about 26 minutes into the flight, let's go ahead and look back at the moment of liftoff from our various views around the Kennedy Space Center and beyond, starting with Adam's view with his fixed camera here at the press site. Moving on to the wide camera view. Moving on to the turn basin. Moving on to the tracker from Pete Carson's. Moving on to Pete's wide tracker views. And finally, Adam's tracking view from the press site. And we're going to pull away from the launch replay views and focus again on the telemetry from the upper stage of the Falcon 9 rocket. You can see the upper stage passing over the west coast of Africa. Tracking views coming back again, or onboard camera views, I should say. Saw a brief look at the chill down of the Merlin vacuum engine, waiting for a call on the start of its second burn.
MVAC ignition.
And a good call and good visuals of the start of this second burn for the second stage engine. This will last for just a little more than a minute in total. About 20 seconds left on this burn.
And with
And there's the shutdown of the second stage engine. Deployment is coming up at about T plus 33 minutes and 11 seconds following another little coast. The second burn helped raise the path of the upper stage, put it on the right trajectory for a good deployment coming up again in just a few minutes. The satellite heading to a geosynchronous transfer orbit. You can see the upper stage now traveling at a little more than 34,000 kilometers per hour right now. Coming up on 30 minutes post liftoff. Just about 3 minutes away from the deployment of the SXM-10 satellite. Taking a look back at the live chat here, want to thank a few more folks for your support this evening/morning. Dr. Dan, the $10 super chat, who says, thanks for the broadcast. Donation is in honor of my elementary school science teacher sister-in-law, Tamara, who flew from Utah to Florida with my bro, Norm, just for this launch. Well, hopefully they got a wonderful view of this mission as it took flight. Glad the weather cleared out for them. Also want to welcome a new channel member, Kathy Serino, joining us with membership at the pad leader level. Welcome aboard, Kathy. We're glad to have you with us. As a reminder, the static fire for the AX4 mission coming up on Sunday, but feel free to pop over to our 24/7 live stream here on YouTube. That is Launchpad Live, where we have our camera trained on the hangar there at Launch Complex 39A as we're anticipating rollout of the Falcon 9 rocket that to happen tomorrow at some point. Less than 2 minutes away from deployment of the SXM satellite now. given the views that we're seeing here, looking up at that satellite, should be a really pretty deployment today. Given the telemetry data, it looks like the satellite will be deployed just about as the upper stage is passing over Mozambique, maybe in between there and Madagascar. Let's go ahead and listen in to deployment.
SiriusXM-10 payload deploy confirmed.
And we just heard the call, and there you can see successful deployment of the SXM-10 geostationary communications satellite.
Incredible view there. And that will wrap up tonight's live coverage of the SXM-10 mission. All of us here at SpaceX want to thank our customer, SiriusXM. We also want to thank the Eastern Range and Federal Aviation Administration for supporting today's mission. If you're interested in more launch coverage, be sure to check out spacex.com/launches for the most up-to-date information. And remember to follow at SpaceX on X. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you again soon.
And with a good deployment of the SXM-10 satellite, that will also wrap up our live coverage here. But before we go, we're going to take a look, as we always do, at the mission stats as they currently stand. Today's flight marked the 8th trip to space and back for Falcon 9 first stage booster B1085. This was the 486th Falcon 9 launch to date, the 69th of the year so far. This was SpaceX's 425th Falcon booster reflight, or the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This was the company's 144th orbital launch within the last 365 days, the 256th orbital flight from Pad 40, and the 311th overall orbital launch from this pad as well. Moving on to the bar chart version of things. And of course, this mission tipped just past June 6th now to June 7th, so is what it is. Moving on to the recovery stats. This was the 112th good landing on the drone ship A Shortfall of Gravitas. That marked the 369th drone ship landing for SpaceX and the 458th overall booster landing to date. Finally, with some industry stats, tonight's flight marked the 48th orbital launch from the Sunshine State of Florida. This was the 73rd from U.S. soil, the 80th from U.S. Rocket Company, and the 124th orbital launch attempt around the globe. 3 orbital failures so far on the year. Here's where our pie chart currently stands, with the United States having launched 80 times this year so far, China with 33. Russia with 6, India and Europe tied at 2, Japan and Germany 1 apiece. Next European launch isn't going to be until August of this year, as the next Ariane 6 is preparing to launch from French Guiana. Also still TBD when the launch from Australia will be able to happen. It's unclear if they've concluded their mishap investigation that stemmed from the payload fairing deployment that happened at the pad there unexpectedly. Well, with that, we're going to go ahead and close down our live coverage. Again, all the Axiom 4 activities happening over the weekend that we've just discussed. We'll be here on the channel with those. I want to thank our moderators in the chat, Jeff Hansen, Aussie Space Girl, Astro Joe, Callistia Lee. Appreciate all of you for helping us out today in the live chat. I want to thank our friend Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions and Chuck and Jen Briggs for helping to track the Falcon 9 rocket, keep eyes on it during the countdown process. Thanks to our photographers, Adam Bernstein and Michael Kane, for shooting the Falcon 9 rocket, and Adam to tracking it as it made its ascent. Most importantly, I want to thank you for wherever you've been watching from with our live launch coverage amid all the weather delays. We'll be back with you on the channel with our next coverage of a Falcon 9 rocket from over at Vandenberg Space Force Base. That's coming up on Sunday as well. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others. We will see you next time, folks. And until then, bye-bye.